From today, I'll take care of Sophie as my own. I'll give her a complete home." Preston Vale's voice rang across the garden like a verdict. 200 guests rose to their feet applauding. Champagne flutes caught the afternoon light. White orchids swayed in the warm Atlanta breeze. And in the middle of that crowd, Malcolm Hayes didn't move. He sat completely still, hands folded, jaw tight, eyes fixed on his 7-year-old daughter standing awkwardly on that stage, searching the audience for him. The man everyone in that garden had already written off. The ex-husband who wasn't enough. The father who had been quietly erased from the story Brianna Caldwell told at dinner parties. What they didn't know was who was sitting beside him. Claire Whitmore didn't touch her champagne. She leaned slightly toward Malcolm and said, just loud enough for him to hear, "You don't need to take anyone's place. You just need to stand in the one that was always yours." Nobody in that garden knew what Claire carried inside her own chest, a wound almost identical to the one Sophie was about to inherit if no one stopped it. What happened in the next 30 minutes would silence every whisper in that room. If you've ever watched someone you love get rewritten out of their own story, stay with Malcolm, because what came next changed everything. If stories like this one stay with you, the kind about quiet strength, real love, and the courage to show up even when it costs you, consider subscribing. A new story drops every week, and every single one is built around the belief that ordinary people do extraordinary things when it matters most. Malcolm Hayes woke up that Saturday the same way he'd woken up every day for the past 3 years. Early, quietly, and alone. His apartment in Southwest Atlanta wasn't much to look at. 1 bedroom, a small kitchen with a window that faced the parking lot, a living room where the couch doubled as his reading chair and his thinking chair, and, on the hardest nights, his crying chair. The walls were mostly bare except for 3 things. A framed photo of Sophie at age 4, laughing so hard her eyes had disappeared. A crayon drawing she'd made him. A house, 2 people, a sun with 8 rays, and a calendar with every other weekend circled in red marker. Those red circles were what he lived for. Malcolm was 36 years old, a structural engineer by training, the kind of man who understood how things were held together and what caused them to fall apart. He was good at his job, methodical, precise, reliable, the kind of engineer colleagues called when a calculation needed to be right the first time. He had never missed a child support payment. He had never missed a scheduled visit. He had never once told Sophie that her mother was the reason their family had broken. He had done everything a man was supposed to do, and somehow he was still losing. The divorce from Brianna Caldwell had been finalized 3 years ago, but in practice, it had started long before the paperwork. It had started the night Brianna looked across the dinner table at Malcolm and said, with a kind of exhausted certainty, that she didn't want to spend the rest of her life being grateful for a man who was simply decent. She wanted more. She hadn't been able to explain exactly what more meant, but Malcolm had understood it clearly enough. It meant someone other than him. Brianna was not a villain. That was the thing that made everything harder. She had grown up in a world of summer homes and country club memberships, and parents who measured success in square footage and social connections. When she'd fallen for Malcolm in her mid-20s, she had genuinely loved him, loved his steadiness, his patience, the way he fixed things with his hands and never complained about it. But love, she had discovered, was not immune to the slow pressure of other people's opinions. Her mother had never said a single cruel word about Malcolm directly. She hadn't needed to. The raised eyebrows, the careful silences, the questions about his long-term plans. It had accumulated over years into a verdict Brianna had eventually stopped fighting. By the time Sophie was 3, Brianna had started rewriting the story. Not in dramatic declarations, not in shouting matches. She did it the way people with social intelligence always do, quietly, over time, through the careful management of what was said and what was left out. She told her friends that the marriage had become unstable. She told her mother that Malcolm struggled with ambition. She never said he was a bad father. She simply arranged the facts in an order that made her decision look inevitable, and then she moved on. Malcolm had watched it happen and hadn't known how to stop it. What hurt him most wasn't the loss of the marriage, it was the look on Sophie's face. That small, uncertain hesitation that appeared whenever someone said something about her father in her presence. The slight pause before she agreed. The way she sometimes looked at Malcolm like she was waiting for him to confirm or deny something she'd been told but didn't quite believe. Sophie was 7 now. She had her mother's eyes and her father's hands, long fingers always reaching for something. She was the kind of child who collected things, smooth river stones, birthday ribbons, scraps of wrapping paper she said were too pretty to throw away. Malcolm knew, because Sophie had told him once during one of their supervised afternoon visits, that she kept everything in a shoebox under her bed. He didn't know if she'd kept his letters there too. He had been writing to her since she was 4. Short letters at first, just drawings and simple words, then longer ones as she grew. He left them with the court-appointed contact, sent some through Brianna's attorney, tucked 1 or 2 into Sophie's bag during visits when Brianna wasn't watching. He didn't know how many had reached her. He didn't know what she had been told about the ones that hadn't. Claire Whitmore had built her reputation on understanding systems, specifically the systems that failed the people no one was paying attention to. At 38, she was the CEO of Whitmore Foundation and Ventures, a hybrid organization that combined impact investment with direct community support across 4 southeastern states. Her name appeared on the covers of business magazines twice a year, usually alongside words like visionary or relentless. In boardrooms, she was known for asking the question nobody else wanted to ask and then waiting in complete silence until someone answered it. She had grown up in Decatur, Georgia, in a house where money was tight and explanations were tighter. Her parents had divorced when she was 6. Her mother, wrecked by the separation, had told Claire in the careful language of a wounded adult that her father had chosen to start over, that he didn't want the complications of a previous life. Claire had believed it for 22 years. Then, at 28, she had found a box of letters in her grandmother's attic. Her father had written to her, dozens of times. He had written on her birthdays and at Christmas, and on the first day of each school year. He had shown up at her elementary school twice, only to be turned away. He had sent money that was returned. He had eventually, after years of being blocked at every point of contact, stopped. Not because he'd stopped loving her, but because the system her mother had built around Claire had been airtight. By the time Claire found those letters, her father had been dead for 4 years. She had never been able to tell him that she didn't blame him anymore. She had never been able to give him that. And that absence, not his but her own, had become the quiet engine of everything she built afterward. Every program she funded for disconnected families, every legal resource she directed toward fathers fighting for access, every conversation she had with a child who looked like they were carrying something that didn't belong to them. She had never spoken about it publicly. She carried it like a stone in her pocket, present always, heavy sometimes, but hers. This was the woman who walked into a rainy Tuesday evening at the West Side Community Center, clipboard in hand, looking for the coordinator of a playground renovation project her foundation was considering funding. She found Malcolm Hayes instead. He was on his knees in the mud, fixing a swing set, talking quietly to a small boy who had been crying and now wasn't. Claire stopped walking. She stood there in the light rain and watched him for a long moment before she said anything at all. The wedding invitation arrived on a Thursday morning, slipped between a utility bill and a takeout menu like it was nothing. Malcolm stood at his kitchen counter and held it for a long time without opening it. The envelope was cream-colored, heavy stock, embossed with a gold monogram. Even the envelope was expensive. He recognized Brianna's taste in it, the deliberate elegance, the quiet statement of arrival. Inside was a single card and a handwritten note. Sophie will be attending. I hope you'll come and conduct yourself accordingly. He read it twice. Then he set it on the counter and made himself a cup of coffee, and stood by the parking lot window and thought about what that sentence actually meant. Conduct yourself accordingly. It meant, don't cause a scene. It meant, remember your place. It meant, come and watch the man who is replacing you stand next to your daughter and smile for photographs, and do it with enough grace that nobody feels uncomfortable about what is happening. He understood the trap immediately. If he didn't go, Sophie might interpret his absence as indifference, one more piece of evidence for the story she was being raised inside. If he went alone, he would spend the entire afternoon absorbing the particular kind of pity that well-dressed people dispensed with their eyes while keeping their smiles perfectly in place. He put the invitation in the kitchen drawer and didn't think about it for 4 days. He met Claire on the 5th day, though he didn't know who she was until later. The West Side Community Center ran a Tuesday and Thursday volunteer program for neighborhood maintenance projects. Malcolm had been showing up for 8 months, not because he needed the hours or the recognition, but because it was one of the few places where he could use his hands and his mind at the same time and not think about the calendar on his wall. That Tuesday it was raining. Not hard, but steady. The kind of Atlanta rain that turned red clay into rust and made everything smell like wet bark. Malcolm was working on a swing set in the far corner of the playground, replacing a rusted chain that had snapped 2 weeks earlier. A small boy had been sitting on the nearby bench for 20 minutes, crying quietly in the way children cry when they've already given up on being heard. Malcolm finished tightening the bolt, then sat back on his heels and looked at the boy. "You want to tell me about it? Or you want to just sit there?" he said, not unkindly. The boy sniffled. "My dad was supposed to pick me up today." Malcolm didn't say anything for a moment. He picked up the next section of chain and began threading it through the bracket. "He didn't show?" "He said he would." "Yeah," Malcolm nodded slowly. "Sometimes people say they will and then something gets in the way. That doesn't mean he forgot about you." "How do you know?" Malcolm looked at the boy. "Because forgetting and not being able to get there are two different things, and I think you already know which one it is." The boy wiped his face with his sleeve. He didn't look entirely convinced, but he stopped crying. It was at that point that Claire spoke. "The program coordinator said you were the one to talk to about the renovation scope." Malcolm turned. A woman in a gray coat was standing at the edge of the playground, holding a clipboard with one hand and a coffee cup with the other. She was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Not quite assessment, not quite surprise, something between the two. "That's me," he said, standing and wiping his hands on his jeans. "Malcolm Hayes." "Claire," she said simply, and shook his hand. She didn't offer a last name. He didn't ask. They talked for 40 minutes about load-bearing specs for new equipment, drainage issues near the eastern fence, and the timeline for the resurfacing project. Claire asked precise questions and wrote the answers in a small, controlled handwriting. She was clearly not a person who wasted words or time. But twice during the conversation, her attention drifted back to the boy, who had since relocated to the newly fixed swing and was pushing himself in slow arcs, alone, but calmer. Before she left, she said, "That thing you said to him, about forgetting versus not being able to get there." Malcolm glanced toward the swing. He needed to hear it. "Did someone say it to you first?" The question was direct without being intrusive. Malcolm considered it. "No," he said. "I had to figure it out myself." Claire nodded once, like that answer confirmed something she'd already suspected. Then she said goodnight and walked back to her car in the rain. She came back Thursday. This time she introduced herself properly. Malcolm recognized her name immediately, not because he followed business news closely, but because the Whitmore Foundation had funded the new roof on the community center 2 years ago. He remembered being surprised then that an organization that size had noticed a building this small. He was more surprised now. They talked again, and then again the following Tuesday. It was during the third conversation, over bad vending machine coffee in the center's break room, that Malcolm told her about the invitation. He wasn't sure why. Something about the way she listened, completely without preparing her response while he was still speaking, made it easier than it should have been. He told her about Sophie, about the letters, about the red circles on the calendar and what they cost him every time one passed without incident and every time one didn't. Claire listened to all of it without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Do you know if Sophie has read any of the letters?" "No," Malcolm said. "I don't know what she's been told about any of it." Something shifted in Claire's expression. Brief, controlled, but real. "I do," she said quietly. And then, carefully, she told him about the box in her grandmother's attic. Not the whole story, just enough. Malcolm understood immediately what she wasn't saying directly. 2 days before the wedding, Claire offered to go with him. Malcolm's first response was no, immediate and instinctive. "You don't know these people," he said. "And if you walk in there with me, every person in that room is going to think I brought you to make a point." "Maybe," Claire said. "Or maybe your daughter will see her father walk into a difficult room and not flinch. And maybe that's worth more than what anyone else thinks. I don't want Sophie to think I'm performing something." "There's a difference between performing and showing up," Claire said. "You've been showing up for her for 3 years in ways nobody saw. This time someone might." Malcolm was quiet for a long moment. "I'm not going there to humiliate Brianna," he finally said. "I know. I'm not going to make a scene." "I know that too." "Then why are you offering to go? You don't owe me anything." Claire looked at him steadily. "Because I know what it looks like when a child is being handed a story about her father that isn't true. And I know what it costs her later when she finds out." She paused. "I'm not going for you, Malcolm. I'm going for Sophie." He looked at her for a long time. He thought about the boy on the swing, pushing himself in slow circles in the rain. He thought about Sophie's face, that hesitation, that waiting look. He thought about the invitation in his kitchen drawer and the sentence hiding inside the polite language. "Remember your place." "Dignity isn't staying quiet and taking it," Claire said. "Sometimes dignity is walking into the room that tried to define you and refusing to let it." Malcolm picked up his coffee cup, found it empty, and set it back down. "Okay," he said, not loudly, not with drama, just the word, flat and certain, like a bolt threaded into place. He was going because Sophie would be standing in that garden looking for him. And he had spent 3 years being somewhere she couldn't see. He was done being invisible. The venue was called Lakeview Gardens, and it was exactly the kind of place Malcolm had known it would be. Stone pathways wound between rows of white-draped tables. A string quartet played near the water's edge. Servers moved through the crowd with the quiet efficiency of people paid to be invisible. The whole thing had the feeling of a magazine spread, beautiful in a way that was also, somehow, a form of pressure. A reminder that this was what success looked like, assembled and displayed for everyone to measure themselves against. Malcolm had worn his good suit, navy, well-fitted, the one he kept in the back of his closet for occasions that required him to take up space deliberately. Claire wore a deep green dress, understated and precise, the kind of outfit that said nothing and therefore said everything. They walked in together. The reaction was not immediate. It moved through the garden the way a current moves through water, starting at the edges, spreading inward, reaching everyone eventually. People recognized Claire first. A woman near the entrance touched her companion's arm and leaned in to whisper. 2 men near the bar turned and looked. A woman Malcolm vaguely remembered from Brianna's circle of college friends visibly recalibrated her expression, the social equivalent of someone quickly adjusting their posture. Then they registered who Claire was standing next to. The whispers adjusted accordingly. Malcolm heard fragments as they moved through the crowd. "Is that really her? What is she doing here? With him?" One man, older, silver-haired, part of the Caldwell extended family, looked at Malcolm with an expression that had moved past surprise into something closer to offense, as though Malcolm's presence in this particular context violated a rule that everyone understood, but no one had written down. Malcolm kept walking. He found them seats near the middle, visible but not provocative, and sat down with the same quiet deliberateness he brought to everything. Brianna reached them during the cocktail reception before the ceremony began. She was wearing ivory, of course she was, and she looked genuinely beautiful, the way people look when they've spent months preparing for a single afternoon. She greeted Claire first, which Malcolm noted. The social calculation was immediate and instinctive. Acknowledge the power in the room before addressing the complication. "Claire, I didn't know you'd be joining us," Brianna said, her voice warm and perfectly modulated. "What a wonderful surprise!" "Malcolm invited me," Claire said simply. "It's a beautiful venue." Brianna's smile held. Then she turned to Malcolm, and something shifted beneath the surface of her expression. Not anger, exactly. More like the look of someone who had prepared for a chess move and found the board rearranged. "I'm glad you came," she said. "I meant what I said in the note. I think it's important for Sophie to see that we can all be adults about this." "I agree," Malcolm said. There was a beat of silence. Brianna filled it the way she always filled uncomfortable silences, with words that sounded generous and landed like something else. "I'm just relieved you have people around you now," she said, her eyes moving briefly to Claire. "Someone in your corner. It makes everything easier, doesn't it?" Malcolm said nothing. He recognized the move, the reframe, the implied history, the suggestion embedded in a compliment that he had previously been without support, without direction, without enough. It was delivered with complete social grace, in a voice that no one standing nearby could object to. But Claire had heard it too. She turned toward Brianna with an expression that was entirely pleasant and entirely unmoved. "I don't think Malcolm ever needed someone to steady him," she said. "A man who keeps showing up for his daughter through all of this, that's not someone who was lost. That's someone who always knew exactly where he was going." She smiled. "But I know you know that." The last sentence landed softly. It wasn't an accusation. It was something quieter and more precise, an acknowledgement that Brianna was intelligent enough to know the difference between what she'd said and what was true. Brianna held her smile for exactly the right number of seconds. Then she excused herself to greet another guest. Malcolm exhaled slowly through his nose. "You didn't have to do that," he said quietly. "I know," Claire said. She picked up her water glass. "She'll recover. She always does." A few feet away, mostly hidden behind a flowering shrub, Sophie stood with her small hands wrapped around a stuffed bear, watching her father with an expression that was careful and hopeful and very young. She had heard every word. The ceremony was brief and well staged. Preston Vale stood at the altar with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to being the most important person in whatever room he occupied. He was handsome in an uncomplicated way, tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of face that photographed well from every angle. When he looked at Brianna, he looked at her with visible pride, the kind that was real but also, Malcolm thought, somewhat proprietary. Malcolm watched without expression. Whatever Preston's feelings for Brianna were, they were not his concern. Sophie sat 3 rows ahead with Brianna's sister. Twice during the ceremony, she turned and found Malcolm with her eyes. Both times he gave her the same small, steady nod. "I'm here. I see you. It's okay." Both times she turned back around without smiling, but her shoulders dropped slightly, like something she'd been holding released a little. The cocktail hour afterward was when Claire found her. Sophie had drifted away from Brianna's sister during a long conversation between the adults and ended up in the corridor just off the main garden, sitting on a stone bench with her bear in her lap, watching a beetle move across the pathway with focused, patient attention. Claire sat down beside her without asking if it was okay. She looked at the beetle, too. "He knows exactly where he's going," Claire said after a moment. Sophie considered this seriously. "How do you know it's a he?" "I don't," Claire admitted. "I'm making assumptions." Sophie almost smiled. "My teacher says assumptions are lazy thinking." "Your teacher is right." Claire glanced at her. "I'm Claire." "I know. You came with my dad." Sophie said it neutrally, without accusation or warmth, just a fact she was locating in the available information. "I did," Claire said. They sat in silence for a moment. The sound of the string quartet drifted through from the garden, light and distant. My mom says my dad doesn't know how to stay, Sophie said. She wasn't looking at Claire when she said it. She was still watching the beetle. That's why things are the way they are. The words went through Claire like cold water. She kept her voice level. What do you think? Sophie was quiet for a long moment. I don't know, she finally said. He always comes when he's supposed to. He's never late. She paused. But he's not there the other days. Do you know why? Sophie shrugged with one shoulder, the gesture of a child carrying an adult-sized question. Mom says that's just how it worked out. Claire nodded slowly. She did not say what she was thinking. She did not tell Sophie that how it worked out was a phrase adults used when they wanted to describe a decision without taking responsibility for it. She found Malcolm 20 minutes later, standing near the edge of the garden watching the lake. She thinks you don't know how to stay, Claire said quietly. Malcolm's jaw tightened. He reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and produced a small envelope, slightly creased, carefully sealed. I was going to give her this after, if Brianna would allow it. He turned the envelope over in his hands. It's the latest one, but there are others. I've been writing them for 3 years. Does Sophie know that? I don't know what Sophie knows, he said. That's the whole problem. They stood together at the edge of the garden, the lake still and flat in front of them, the sounds of the wedding carrying from behind. Tell her, Claire said. She's 7. She's 7 and she's already carrying a story that isn't accurate, Claire said. Children can handle truth told with love. What they cannot handle is being left alone inside a lie. Malcolm looked down at the envelope in his hands. Inside the garden, the reception was beginning. Preston found Malcolm near the bar during the first hour of the reception. He didn't approach loudly or with visible hostility. That wasn't Preston's style. He moved through social situations the way he moved through business ones, with calibrated confidence, the manner of someone who had never needed to raise his voice because the room had always arranged itself around him before he got there. Malcolm, he extended his hand. His grip was firm and brief. Glad you could make it. Preston. Malcolm shook it and said nothing else. Preston signaled for a drink, accepted it from the server with a nod, and turned back to Malcolm with the relaxed posture of someone who was absolutely certain he was winning a conversation that hadn't technically started yet. I want you to know I have a lot of respect for you showing up today, Preston said. That takes character. Genuinely. He paused, letting the compliment settle before continuing. I also think we're both adults who care about Sophie's well-being, so I hope we can be direct with each other. Go ahead, Malcolm said. Today is important for Brianna, for the family we're building. Preston turned his glass slowly in his hand. I don't want Sophie to feel pulled in different directions on a day that should be simple and joyful for her. I think you understand what I mean. I understand what you mean, Malcolm said. Good. Preston nodded as though this had already resolved something. I also want to be upfront about something because I think clarity helps everyone. He looked at Malcolm with the measured directness of a man delivering a business proposal he expected to be accepted. After today, I'd like Sophie to start calling me Dad. Nothing formal, just natural over time. It'll be easier for her at school, with friends. Kids need consistency. I think we both want that for her. Malcolm looked at him. He took a moment before speaking because the moment required it. Sophie already has a dad, he said, quietly, without heat. Preston's expression shifted. Not much, just a slight tightening around the eyes, the look of someone who had expected a door to open and found it closed. Of course, he said smoothly. I only meant in a practical sense, in terms of her day-to-day life. I understand what you meant, Malcolm said again. The repetition was deliberate. Preston heard it that way. He studied Malcolm for a moment, then smiled. The smile of someone recalibrating without conceding, and touched his shoulder briefly before moving back toward the head table. Malcolm stood at the bar and breathed. What had just happened was not a threat. It had been delivered in the language of reason and practicality, and the genuine belief, Malcolm was almost certain of this, that Preston thought he was being helpful. That was what made it so hard to answer with anger. Preston wasn't operating from cruelty. He was operating from a world in which Malcolm's role in Sophie's life was a logistical inconvenience that could be neatened up with the right terminology. He didn't see a father, he saw a variable. Brianna found Malcolm 20 minutes later. She had dropped some of the afternoon's careful composure. Not dramatically, Brianna never did anything dramatically, but Malcolm could see the effort it was taking her to keep her voice even. "I saw you talking to Preston," she said. "He came to me." "I know." She glanced back toward the reception. "Sophie has been looking for you all afternoon. She keeps leaving the table." "She's 7, Brianna. She doesn't understand seating arrangements." "Malcolm," her voice tightened, "I need today to go smoothly, and I need you to understand that if you do anything that upsets her today, I will have to reconsider the current arrangement, the visits, the schedule, all of it." Malcolm looked at her for a long moment. "I came here for Sophie," he said. "That's the only reason I'm standing in this garden right now. You know that." Brianna held his gaze for a moment, then looked away. Something passed across her face that wasn't quite guilt and wasn't quite sorrow, but lived somewhere in the same neighborhood as both. She walked back to the reception without another word. The family toast came 40 minutes later. Preston stood at the microphone with a glass of champagne, delivering the kind of speech Malcolm had expected. Warm, polished. The story of how he and Brianna had found each other told in the way that made everyone in the room feel included in the romance. He was good at it. Malcolm gave him that. Then Preston set down his notes. "Before I finish," he said, "I want to say something from the heart." He turned toward Brianna's sister's table where Sophie was sitting. "Sophie, would you come up here?" Sophie looked uncertain. Her aunt nudged her gently and she slid off her chair and made her way to the front, her bear tucked under one arm. Preston put his hand lightly on her shoulder and faced the audience. "Today isn't just the beginning of my life with Brianna," he said. "It's the beginning of a complete family. And I want Sophie to know, in front of everyone here, that I'm going to take care of her. I'm going to give her a real home, a full one." The garden erupted in applause. People rose from their chairs, champagne flutes lifted. Sophie stood at the microphone with her bear and looked out at the crowd with the expression of a child who had been placed at the center of something she hadn't agreed to and wasn't sure she understood. Then she found Malcolm in the audience. She looked directly at him, this small, serious girl with her mother's eyes and her father's hands, and her expression asked something that no 7-year-old should have to ask in a room full of people celebrating. "Are you still there?" Malcolm's chest contracted. He gripped the edge of his chair. He stood up halfway, then sat back down, the motion of a man fighting two equal and opposite forces simultaneously. He would not make a scene. Not here. Not in front of Sophie. He folded his hands in his lap and made himself stay seated. And then Claire's hand came to rest on his forearm, light and steady. "You don't need to take anyone's place," she said quietly. "You just need to stand in the one that was always yours." Malcolm looked at her. Then he looked back at Sophie, still standing at that microphone, still watching him with that question in her eyes. He made his decision. He stood up. The applause was still fading when Claire rose from her seat. She didn't move quickly. She didn't announce herself. She simply stood, smoothed the front of her dress, and walked toward the front of the garden with the unhurried certainty of someone who had made a decision and was no longer negotiating it with herself. A server near the microphone stand stepped aside instinctively. Preston, who had just begun to guide Sophie back toward her seat, turned with an expression of polite confusion that was already shading into something less polite. Claire reached the microphone. She adjusted the stand slightly, looked out at the assembled guests, and waited for the remaining murmur to settle. The garden went quiet. "I'm sorry to interrupt the program," she said. Her voice was calm and clear, the voice of someone accustomed to rooms that needed to be held. "I'll be brief. I want to tell you something that I've never said publicly. I think this is the right room for it, and I think this is the right moment." She paused. Not for effect, for accuracy, choosing the exact words. "When I was 6 years old, my parents divorced. My mother told me, in the careful way that adults explain difficult things to children, that my father had chosen to move on, that he didn't want the complications of his previous life. She looked down briefly, then back up. I believed her. I believed her for 22 years because she was my mother and I was 6, and that's what children do. They believe the story they're given because they don't have another one. The garden was completely still. The string quartet had stopped. Somewhere near the back, a chair shifted. When I was 28, Claire continued, I found a box of letters in my grandmother's attic. My father had written to me, dozens of times, birthdays, Christmases, first days of school. He had come to my elementary school twice trying to see me and been turned away. He had sent money that was returned. He had kept trying and then eventually, because he was a human being with a limit like every human being, he stopped. She paused. Not because he stopped loving me, because every door had been closed. She did not look at Brianna when she said this. She didn't need to. The room understood the geometry. By the time I found those letters, my father had been dead for 4 years. Her voice remained even. That steadiness was not the absence of feeling. It was the result of enormous practice. I never got to tell him that I didn't blame him. I never got to give him that. And I have spent every year since then thinking about how different it might have been for both of us if someone had simply refused to let the story go uncorrected. She turned slightly, her gaze moving to Sophie, who was standing a few feet away, perfectly still, her bear held against her chest. Sophie. Her voice shifted, lower, gentler, the way you speak to someone you want to actually reach. No one in this room has the right to ask you to choose. You can love your mother, you can care for Preston, and you can also need your father. Those things are not in competition. Love is not a chair with room for only one person. She paused. Anyone who tells you otherwise is telling you something that is about them, not about you. Sophie didn't move, but her eyes were very bright. Claire stepped back from the microphone and looked at Malcolm. Your turn, she said quietly. Malcolm stood. He was aware of 200 people watching him. He was aware of Brianna at the head table, her face drained of its careful color. He was aware of Preston standing a few feet away with the rigid posture of someone who had been outmaneuvered and was still calculating how. None of it mattered. He walked to where Sophie was standing and crouched down in front of her so they were eye level. He didn't take the microphone. He didn't need the room to hear him. He needed Sophie to hear him. Hey, he said. Hey, she said back, very small. He reached into his jacket pocket and took out the envelope, slightly creased, carefully sealed. He held it in both hands for a moment, then held it out to her. This is a letter I wrote you, he said. There are others. I've been writing them since you were 4. I don't know which ones you've seen, and that's something we can figure out together later. But I want you to know that every single one of them exists. Every birthday, every first day of school, every time something happened that I wanted to tell you about. He kept his voice steady. I wrote them all down. Sophie looked at the envelope. She didn't take it yet. Mom said you don't know how to stay, she said, not as an accusation, as a question she'd been holding for a long time, waiting for a safe moment to put down. Malcolm absorbed it. He didn't flinch from it, and he didn't deflect it. I know she said that, he said, and I think your mom was in a lot of pain when things ended between us, and pain can change the way a story gets told. He paused. But here's what's true. I have never missed a visit that I was allowed to have. I have never stopped paying for your life. I have never stopped writing these letters. And I have never, not for a single day, stopped loving you. Sophie's chin had begun to tremble. Then why aren't you there? Her voice cracked on the last word. The other days. Why aren't you there? Malcolm felt it go through him like a current. He breathed through it. Because sometimes when adults hurt each other, they make decisions that affect the people they love most, he said. And that is not your fault. None of it has ever been your fault. Not one part of it. He looked at her directly. And if you'll let me, I want to keep showing up. Not all at once. I know that would be too much. But slowly, in whatever way makes you feel safe. I'm not going anywhere, Sophie. I haven't been going anywhere. I've just been somewhere you couldn't see me. Sophie stood completely still for a moment, bare pressed against her chest, the envelope in her father's outstretched hands, the whole garden waiting around them. Then she stepped forward and put her arms around Malcolm's neck. He closed his eyes. He held her with the careful, concentrated force of 3 years of letters and red circles on calendars, and every ordinary, invisible act of a man who had refused to stop being her father, even when the story said he had. The garden was silent. Then, somewhere near the back, someone began to clap. Slowly at first, then more, until the sound filled the space. Heavier than before, more reluctant. The sound of people arriving at something rather than being carried by it. Brianna had not moved from the head table. She sat very straight in her ivory dress, her champagne untouched, her hands folded in her lap. She was looking at Sophie, this girl she had tried to protect by rewriting the story, who was now standing in the middle of the corrected version, arms around her father's neck, crying with the relief of someone who had been carrying something much too heavy for much too long. Brianna's face did something complicated and private and very difficult to watch. Preston stood a few feet away, hands at his sides. He had stood at that microphone and promised to give Sophie a complete home. But watching her hold on to Malcolm with that specific, desperate relief, he understood for the first time that completeness was not something he could deliver by replacing anyone. It was something that already existed and had been partially blocked. He looked at the floor. He had promised Sophie a full life, and he was beginning to understand that a full life for her had to include the man she was holding on to right now. He stayed quiet. He let the moment be what it was. After the guests had drifted back to their tables, Brianna crossed the garden to where Malcolm was standing near the stone wall at the far edge. Claire had stepped away to give them space. Brianna stopped in front of Malcolm. Her eyes were red at the corners, and the perfect edges of the afternoon had gone soft. "I told myself I was protecting her," she said, "when I managed things the way I did. I told myself it was cleaner, easier, that it would hurt her less if she didn't feel the gap." She looked at her hands. "I think I was protecting myself." Malcolm didn't confirm it or deny it. "I was afraid of losing her to you," Brianna said. "So I made you the one who had already left." She looked up at him. "That was wrong. I know that was wrong." Malcolm was quiet for a long moment. "We can't fix what's already behind us," he said finally. "But Sophie's still 7. There's a lot of time ahead of her if we decide to do this differently." He held her gaze. "That's all I'm asking. Not forgiveness. Not a conversation about the past. Just don't make her pay for it anymore." Brianna nodded. Once, small and very certain. It was not a resolution. It was a beginning of one. The weeks after the wedding were not cinematic. There was no dramatic phone call from Brianna, no formal ceremony of reconciliation, no moment where everything that had been broken was declared healed. Real repair didn't work that way, and Malcolm had long since stopped expecting it to. What happened instead was smaller and more durable. A text message 2 weeks after the wedding asking if he was available the following Saturday. A slight loosening in the language of the custody arrangement. A Friday afternoon where Sophie was dropped off at his apartment an hour early, with her backpack and her bear and a handwritten note from Brianna that said only, "She asked to come." Brianna was not a transformed person. She was a person who had seen something clearly for the first time and was deciding slowly what to do with it. That was enough. For now, that was enough. Preston, for his part, had gone quiet in the weeks after the wedding. Not cold, just thoughtful, in the way people go quiet when something has rearranged their understanding. He stopped mentioning the name question. He started asking Sophie what she wanted to do on weekends instead of announcing plans. Small things. The kind of small things that, over time, add up to something real. Malcolm read Brianna's note standing at his front door. Then he folded it carefully and put it in his desk drawer beside the copies of Sophie's letters. Sophie came in and looked around his apartment the way she always did, methodically, cataloging any changes since her last visit. She stopped in front of the framed photo on the wall, the one of her at 4, laughing with her eyes closed. "I look ridiculous," she said. "You look happy," Malcolm said. Sophie considered this with the seriousness she brought to most things. I guess those aren't always different, she decided, and went to find where he'd put the good colored pencils. She started asking for the letters 3 weeks later. Not all at once. She asked for one first, the most recent one, which she'd kept in the envelope tucked into the front pocket of her backpack. Then she asked if there were others. Malcolm told her there were. He told her he'd kept copies of everything he'd ever sent in a folder in his desk drawer. Can I read them sometime? She asked. Whenever you want, he said. They were written for you. Sophie went quiet for a moment. They were sitting at his kitchen table, working on a model bridge he'd started with her the previous weekend. Balsa wood and small metal pins, a project designed to need 2 sets of hands. Dad, she said without looking up from the piece she was fitting. Yeah? Were you sad? When you were writing them and you didn't know if I was reading them? Malcolm looked at the bridge. Yes, he said, but I kept writing them anyway, because I wanted you to have them, even if it took a while for them to reach you. Sophie pressed the piece into place. It held. Okay, she said, with the tone of someone filing information in the correct location. That's what I thought. She kept the letters in a shoebox with a yellow lid, which she stored under her bed at Malcolm's apartment. Claire stayed. Not in the way people stayed in movies, with declarations and grand gestures. She stayed the way a person stays when they've decided that something matters, and they're willing to let it take the shape it needs to take. She and Malcolm did not rush anything. They had both spent enough time around broken things to know that speed was not the same as progress. She came to his apartment on Tuesday evenings, sometimes for dinner, sometimes just to sit in the same room and read while he worked at his desk. Sophie, on the weekends she was there, had developed the habit of narrating whatever she was drawing directly to Claire, not asking for opinions, just offering the running commentary of a child who had decided an adult was safe enough to think out loud around. Malcolm watched this happen gradually, the way you watch something grow, noticing it most in the moments when you weren't specifically looking. One Saturday afternoon, Sophie looked up from her shoebox of letters and asked Claire, with the directness that was entirely her own, "Do you think your father knows you forgave him?" Claire set down her book. "I hope so," she said quietly. "I really do." Sophie nodded, as though this were a satisfactory answer to an important question. Then she went back to arranging her letters in the order they'd been written. Claire looked across the room at Malcolm. He was standing in the kitchen doorway, a dish towel over his shoulder, watching them both. She had come into this thinking she was helping a child avoid a wound she herself had carried for decades. She had not expected Sophie, 7 years old, patient and precise and still learning how to trust, to be the one who said the thing that finally allowed her to set it down. She hadn't expected any of this. That was the part she kept returning to. How strange it was that the things that changed you most were never the ones you had planned for. 3 months after the wedding, Malcolm quietly put together a weekly workshop at the West Side Community Center, a space for fathers navigating custody and trying to rebuild relationships with their children after separation. He hadn't announced it as anything significant. He simply started showing up on Thursday evenings with coffee and folding chairs and the willingness to sit in a room with men who were carrying things they didn't know how to put down. Claire provided the funding. She did not put her name on it. At the small fundraiser the center held for the program, Sophie sat in the front row in a yellow dress, drawing in her sketchbook while the adults talked. Halfway through the evening, she reached over and placed a drawing on Malcolm's knee without interrupting him. He glanced down at it mid-sentence. A house, 2 adults, a child with long fingers standing in the middle, a sun above them with 8 rays. He recognized it immediately. The same composition as the crayon drawing on his wall. The one she'd made him years ago when she was too small to understand what she was drawing, only that she wanted to give him something. He folded it carefully and put it in his jacket pocket. He finished his sentence. After the event, when the folding chairs had been stacked and the coffee cleared, and Sophie had fallen asleep in the back seat on the drive home, Malcolm sat for a moment in the parking lot before starting the engine. He thought about the calendar on his wall, the red circles, The years of visits that lasted 2 hours and ended with Sophie being buckled into someone else's car. He thought about a woman stepping up to a microphone in a garden full of people, choosing to tell the truth she'd carried alone for a decade. Not for herself, but for a child she'd only just met. He thought about his daughter asleep in the back seat, her sketchbook still open on her lap. He started the engine. He drove home. And for the first time in 3 years, the drive back didn't feel like leaving. It felt like returning. Malcolm didn't win because he was louder, or richer, or more powerful than the room that had tried to write him out. He won because he kept showing up, quietly, consistently, in ways that nobody saw and nobody applauded, until one day, someone finally did. And Claire didn't step up to that microphone because she was fearless. She did it because she knew exactly what silence cost. She had paid that price herself, in years and letters, and a conversation she never got to have with her father. She stepped up so Sophie wouldn't have to pay it too. That's what this story is really about. Not weddings or status, or who gets the last word in a room full of witnesses. It's about the people who keep loving quietly when the world stops watching. The fathers who write letters that may never arrive. The children carrying stories that were never theirs to carry. And the unexpected strangers who walk into your hardest moment and remind you that you were never as alone as you thought. If that stayed with you, if you know someone who needed to hear it, or if you've been Malcolm in some version of your own life, share this with them. And if you want more stories like this one, stories about real strength, quiet love, and the courage it takes to show up even when it costs you, subscribe. A new one comes out every week. We'll see you in the next one.